Attention, please. In the hopes of keeping us on time this evening, calling to order the Board of Directors, Dr. Cog Board of Directors meeting. It's Wednesday, May 15, 2013, 6:36 p.m. Could we rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance? And may we have a roll call, please?
Eva Henry, Eric Hansen, Bill Holland, Nancy Sharp, Elise Jones, Dennis McCloskey, Tim Mock, Tom Hayden, Michael Hancock, Rocky Pirro, Chris Nevitt, Robin Kniech, Jack Hilbert, Connie McLean, Don Rozier, Casey Ty, Rachel Zinzinger, Mark Williams, Bob Roth, Renee Peterson, Sue Horn, here. David Spellman, Casey Becker, here. And Justin, here. Cynthia Martinez, here. Paul Donahue, Clark Hamelman, Kathy Noon, here. Ron Engels, Tom Riley, Doug Tisdall, here. Gail Christie, Jim Benson, Jason McEldowney, Michael Ayers, Joe Baker, Todd Riddle, Laura Keegan, Mike Spees, Randy Penn, Joe Jefferson, Mark Gruber, Joyce Thomas, George Heath, Jennifer Weinberger, Lisa Jones, Bob Easton, Amy Shears, Henry Aragot, Matthew Skeen, Paula Bovo, Dario Katarczyk, Marjorie Sloan, Ron Rakowski, Jack Morgan, Christine Berg, Stacy Luberger, Adam Paul, Jim Taylor, Jackie Millay, Katie Witt, Hank Dalton, Julie Van Domelen, Ursula Morgan, Chris Wolf, Sean Foray, Joe Gearlock, Joyce Downing, John Dyack, Cliff Mueller, Fred Lissy, Deborah Williams, Val Vigel, Nancy McNally, Joyce J., Doug Young, Deborah Perkins Smith, Simon Tafoya. That's all.
Thank you. And before we introduce new members and alternates this evening, Dennis reminded me that Commissioner Hansen has had some complications, if you haven't heard, and he is back in intensive care, so would appreciate your thoughts for Eric. Okay, and so this evening, the new members that I know, or alternates that I know are here, are Renee Peterson, did I pronounce that correctly? From Aurora? Renee, welcome. Rocky Pirro from Denver in the back corner back there, and from the governor's office, Simon Tafoya. Welcome. And that's what I know. Are there any people that I missed? Okay. So next we just need to approve the agenda. I'm in need of a motion to approve the agenda. All right. All those in favor, please. Aye. Opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. First thing on the agenda is a report from the chair, which normally is very short, but this evening there are a few things that I would like to talk with you about. First, I just wanted to, after observing our MVIC meeting and our admin meeting today and some other meetings, wanted to talk a little bit about my vision of how the chair should be running meetings. And that is, it's my job to facilitate the meeting and make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak, to have their opinion or their information shared with the rest of the group. So in order to do that, I will start out by telling you it is so much easier to see every hand that goes up if you are sitting out there than it is up here. I felt so sorry for Rachel at the MVIC meeting because everybody was yelling, wait, I was next, and she was trying to keep up. I will do my best to recognize everyone, generally in the order that you raise your hand, and when I call on someone, I'll give you everyone else that I have on the list. So if you've been waving your hand for 10 minutes and I don't call your name, I haven't heard it, seen you, so just keep right on waving, and Connie will help me. Connie and Jennifer try to help me see everyone at the same time also. In the spirit of trying to give everybody the opportunity to speak, though, if we do get into some back and forths, I may not call on you next if I see that someone has been thoughtfully listening and now they've raised their hand and they would like to share with the group. So don't think that that means that I'm not going to call on you. I will eventually get there, but I'm just going to try and let everybody speak. Also, I am a huge fan of a motion to call the vote if we have been around Hogan's Barn 17 times and we're just saying the same thing over and over and over. But I'm not a fan of it if I see other people that still want to say things. It's not really the best use to just stop discussion. So if I get a motion to call the vote, I might respectfully ask you to withdraw it if I see other people who have their hands up and still want to speak, and I'll say that. You have the choice of not withdrawing it and we go ahead with the vote, but just don't think that there's anything personal in that. I just want to make sure everybody gets the opportunity to speak. So that's kind of the summary of that, although I am certainly open to feedback. If I've said something you think isn't right, let me know that. If you have some additional suggestions that I didn't cover, please let me know that as well. And speaking of feedback, the second thing I wanted to talk about, and I've had the opportunity to discuss this with a few of you, I haven't had a chance to get with everyone yet. I would like to, after my retirement the end of this month, woohoo, be able to spend the time to meet maybe with everyone, either one-on-one or with your alternate. I can come to your jurisdiction. I can meet you here before or after a meeting. I can meet you in another state if you want to do that. I mean, yeah, Hawaii's good always, and I have other recommendations as well if you want to meet outside of Denver. So I have no order for this. It's whoever I run into in the hall. If I haven't called you yet, it's just I haven't run into you in the hall. Feel free to call me, see if we can't set something up. My objective in those meetings is to just talk about what goes well with DRCOG, what you would like to change if you had a Hogwarts wand and could wave it and fix everything tonight. What you see as the vision or the mission of DRCOG. I mean, I know we have those things in writing. They're in vision speak, as I call it, or Doug speak, when it's something like that. But I would like to have some informal conversations about it. So just a heads up, I may be calling you. Again, there's no order. Feel free to call me. And speaking of vision for DRCOG, that moves me on to the third item, probably the one that you're most interested in, and that is just an update on where we are after the workshop. There were lots of wonderful suggestions that came out of the workshop. The good news is there were lots of suggestions. The bad news is you can rarely do all that stuff in 1 year. So here's what we've been doing. Staff has been summarizing what each group came up with, going back to the spokesperson for the group, if you will, when they did that last presentation to make sure that those summaries were accurate. And then those summaries came to the board officers who've been trying to target the key things that we think we should be tackling. This may be tackling other things in addition to this, but there are, I think, 4. Counting. Usually I'm pretty good at counting, but we'll see when I get finished. And I'm going to start, we had some really weighty issues that we will tackle this year. We may not conclude this year. We had some other issues that were great suggestions, pretty low-hanging fruit. I think we can get some really good things done in conjunction with them, so I'm going to start with those because I always like successes. The one that probably every group suggested was modification or improvement to or addition to the training classes that we have. We have a lot of short courses. We talked about things like online training. We talked about things like intermediate, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So if you just got elected to the board and you're still trying to figure out what the initials stand for, you may want to take the beginning class. If you've heard lots and lots about transportation and you don't want to start again at my thing, I say you understand CMAC dollars or DMAC dollars, but I think that's a disc jockey. So you know how far you are along in that process, you may want to tune into one of the later classes. So that's one of the things that we're going to tackle. That's probably going to be the easiest one. And that will probably be, we're talking about some ad hoc committees to work on these things. So if you want, you know, be thinking about, if you have some ideas and you'd be interested in serving on these, I'm not actually forming them this evening. I'm just like giving you an update, but keep this in mind. So an ad hoc committee to work with boards and staff to review this. This is probably an ad hoc committee that would be both board and staff members. The other ones, and we talked a little bit about who should be on the ad hoc committees, and talked yesterday, I guess, time flies when you're having fun, about some of these committees need to be made up of the board because the board needs to set the policy. How you get that policy accomplished may be an issue for Dr. Cog's staff, municipal and county staffs to get together and work on. But the policy and the procedures and how it works, the board should be setting. This is one, though, that I think will probably be both. I can either stop for input after each one, or I can just keep plowing through, and then you guys can ask me questions, make comments, do whatever. The second thing that we talked about, trying to figure out the order of importance here, and the E's, I think I'll move to tips. I think there's pretty fair consensus that tips is a complex process that is fairly unwieldy and inflexible at this point in time. So it wasn't designed to deal with mid-year changes to transportation allocation. That's not how it was designed. And it's probably time, ever since the Great Recession, as I call it, we've been in a period where we send things out for bid and we actually get lower bids and have money left over, and then we have to come back in and figure out how we're going to spend it. So there's a fairly big groundswell for a review of the TIPS process, simplification of the TIPS process. Again, that probably needs to be an ad hoc committee. At some point in time, that will need to include staffs because that will need to have some specific details on how that TIPS program is going to work and what it's going to look like. But initially, again, likely to be an ad hoc committee of board members who say, here's how we want the TIPS process to work and the decisions we think we should make. Then staff, how do you get us to that point? So that will be coming up in the future too. In all of these issues, you know, it used to be that we would just have these things presented to us and we would all say, okay, that's great. That's not where we are now, and I think that's a healthy thing. I think it's really good that we have lots of questions and lots of interaction on issues. Moving from tips, I'm going up the scale of difficulty here. The next thing would be MVIC. We've had lots of discussions about MVIC and how it works or doesn't work. Talked a lot about why it doesn't work now the way it used to work. And that could be term limits, that could be new people for whatever reason. It could be lots of reasons. But MVIC is no longer the, if you will, wise sages that delve deeper into issues and give us recommendations, and we all trust their judgment and say, that's great. So the question is, how should MVIC work? Should there be MVIC? Pretty weighty issues. Again, I think that's going to be an ad hoc committee made up of board members who need to think about that. Is there a place for MVIC as we move forward, and what should that structure look like? What should that place be? Now, obviously, in all these cases, the ad hoc committees that are set up would need to be talking about the timeline and reporting back to the board and what we want to get out of that. Moving to probably the weightiest issue, that would be structure of the Dr. Cog board itself. For lots of reasons, this board has served this region very well for 50-some years. but it hasn't changed its basic structure. We've added more members, we've expanded our area, but it hasn't changed its basic structure in 50 years, and maybe shouldn't, but it's probably time to review that. We've had some indications from members that we're not made up the same as other MPOs. Honestly, I'd be a little surprised if you found two identical MPOs, because MPOs are driven by federal law, they're driven by their individual state law, they're driven by the regions that they serve. They're very different across the country. So while we're looking at the possibility of an ad hoc committee, we believe that there should be more information involved in this, and the feeling is, and I think we're all agreed on this, it would be really helpful to have independent experts, if you will, in the field talk to us about how other MPOs are made up, what the advantages are of smaller MPOs, what the advantages are of larger MPOs. There are pros and cons to almost anything. So we're thinking about the having chosen one, but Brookings Institute, the Center of Urban Transportation, National Association of Regional Councils, Association of MPOs. I mean, there are a number of groups that can talk to us and give us some of that information and make us a little more knowledgeable before we tackle this subject. And so we're looking at setting things like that up, and then looking again for an ad hoc committee to take that information and the feedback they're getting from board members and look at this whole structure and how it works. So speaking of independent groups, and one of the advantages to bringing in an independent recognized expert in the field is they don't have a dog in this fight, as Bill Vidal would say. It was always one of my favorite quotes from him. And they're independent. They don't come in with any perceptions, preconceived notions. My next subject is what Jennifer calls myth-busting, I call fact-finding. Everybody comes into every meeting they ever have with some preconceptions, some perceptions about the group, about what's going to be discussed, about how things are going to be resolved. Sometimes those are spot on. They're 100% accurate. Sometimes there's not one thing in there that's accurate. It's just things we've heard, things that by word of mouth have gone around, and they have nothing to do with facts. We're going to try to tackle some of those issues and share information that we hope will at least provide us with the facts. And if we have the facts, we can make better decisions. One of the examples is how MPOs are organized, because I've heard lots of feedback on how MPOs are organized. I don't know how they're all organized. My guess is nobody here knows how they're all organized. So we'll get some more information and we'll use that. Another example, and I've asked Jennifer to make up some copies for us of how financial funding has been distributed for transportation over the last, I think it's 12 years. Because I've heard at some point in time from everybody in the room that their jurisdiction either gets no money or not enough money, that some other jurisdiction gets all the money, you know, that the North doesn't get any money, that South paid for a lot of their own things, and so they haven't gotten as much as you think, that the bigger jurisdictions, Denver gets all of it, Denver gets none of it, Bennett gets none of it. I mean, you know, here's one place where we know where every penny went. We can split that by county, by municipality, by project, by north, south, east, west, however you want it split. We can tell you what percentage it is of the whole. We can tell you what the per capita distribution is. We can tell you what the return on your investment for your dues. So the sheet that you're getting now is a very simple summary. This is just, and you have two different summaries in here. One includes the federal, the state, and the RTD dollars. The other one is Dr. Cog only dollars. I told Jennifer if I were doing a TIPS presentation, this would be up on the screen every time, so we could just eliminate that rabbit trail right off the top. But it's this kind of information that we hope to share. If you look at this and you say, okay, but wait a minute, how much is that per capita or what? Get those questions in. We can dispel some of these perceptions or myths or whatever, or confirm them. But we can get that information out. So we're going to try to do that moving forward as well. These are a couple of the issues that we picked for the moment. And if you have other areas where you're saying, well, do you have any information on, we'll try to get you that information as well. So now, questions, comments, that kind of concludes my comments this evening. Okay. Well, then I will turn it over to the Executive Director for her report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a really brief report this evening. First and foremost, I want to let you know that the June board meeting will be held on June 26th, which is a week later than it normally would, and this is because of CML's, thank you, annual conference. So please modify your calendar. June 26th is that meeting date. You're going to hear, I think, from Rich, depending on how much time we have this evening, but I think you're going to hear from Rich later tonight to give a legislative wrap-up. But I just wanted to point out that Senate Bill 127 passed this session, and so there's going to be an additional $2 million in funds available for seniors statewide. And looking at issues related to the sequester, this is really good news for Colorado. For those of us who follow these things nationally, there are several states that are in really bad shape right now because of the sequester. Meals on Wheels are being cut substantially. So on behalf of Dr. Cog, I'd certainly like to thank Senator Guzman and Representative Primavera for all the work that they did making sure this bill got passed. And I also want to recognize Rich Morrow, who was great shepherding this thing through the process, and also Jayla Sanchez-Warren, who's been really helpful in this effort as well. I wanted to point out, too, that 11 by 17 document that's at many of the seats. It says strategic plan timeline. There have been some minor updates made to that, particularly as it relates to scheduling, scenario planning, and how we're going to be bringing back scenarios to you in July so that you can start to see what kinds of information we're getting out of the model. We can identify for you any data that doesn't appear to be technically reliable. We can get a better sense of how sensitive the model is, and we can start on that next process of modeling additional scenarios. And there's also a change on there reflecting the initiation of TIP policy development, which is what Sue was just referring to. How do we go about putting together a TIP that allows you to be much more flexible and nimble, but yet have enough substance and body to it that folks understand how the process is going to work. Unfortunately, we haven't had a regular TIP cycle in, I don't know when, maybe 4 years, I'd say, between overly conservative estimates by CDOT, and we get more money than we had anticipated, and then we had things like ERA. So there's just been all kinds of different things that have happened that we just haven't had a regular TIP cycle. As Sue mentioned too, I think what really needs to happen going forward on TIP is this board needs to say, this is what we want to get out of the TIP. And I don't know what this is. I'm just saying that I think the board needs to establish that policy level, and then ask the technical experts from the TAC and the Dr. Cog staff on up to inform how to get you to that place, rather than sort of starting at the bottom and having the technical folks be the beginning of the process. I think the board should start this process. So that's reflected in that as well. And then the last thing I wanted to point out was annually in May, the administrative committee is responsible for kicking off the evaluation of the executive director. That would be me. And so this evening, after the board meeting, you're going to be receiving an email from Roxy Ronson here at Dr. Cog. Board members will be receiving an email from Roxy Ronson here at Dr. Cog, and it will have a link to a survey. This is the survey. Very, very easy. If you don't want to put a lot of time into it, you don't have to. If you do want to put a lot of time in it, there's plenty of opportunity for that. There are 2 places, actually 3 places to put comments. You can put about 4,500 characters in each of those, so it's about a page and a half of information, so you can put all sorts of things in there if you'd like to. There's going to be an attachment to that email that looks like this, and this document is what I've put together based on the performance criteria that the administrative committee established a year ago, and this is my response to how I have acted on those criteria with the support and help of the Dr. Cog staff. If you have any questions or concerns about the information in this document, how the electronic survey works, anything like that, Roxy's contact information will be part of that email, so you can feel free to give her a call. All of the survey results are confidential. They go directly to Jack Hilbert, who is currently the chair of the administrative committee. So he will be compiling all of these remarks that you all make, all of these ratings that you put into the evaluation, and then he and the officers and I will meet a week before the June board meeting to talk about the evaluation results, and then those results will be summarized and discussed at the admin committee meeting, I assume, in June as well. So unless you have any questions, that will conclude my report.
Madam Chair, point of order. I believe
Ron.
we missed the RTC motion and report.
Lawyers. Technically, that's calling for the orders of the day, by the way.
I didn't want to get that taken.
Oh, boy.
Just saying.
So, sorry, I was just so busy with the other stuff. I'm going to ask Steve Cook to summarize the RTC meeting. Not that I wasn't there and chaired it, but.
At RTC, they took action on 2 of the items that are on your consent agenda tonight with TIP amendments, and they approved the TIP amendments, and they also approved the project delays report for this cycle. They also discussed we also discussed 2 aspects of the 2040 planning process: the visioning process of the roadway and rapid transit system in the region for 2040, and also the scenario analysis process that we'll be discussing a little bit later tonight. And both of those had, I think, really good discussion on those. Was there one other one? And then we gave a report on presentation on our annual report on traffic congestion in the Denver region, and we'll also be providing that to you next month, to the full Dr. Cog board.
Madam Chair, move to accept the report.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the report. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. And I would just like to make 2 comments. One, the congestion is all coming back to me now, because then I realized why it takes me so long to get here. I'm driving through lots of red and green circles, and 2, I'm going to need more handlers. Okay. So next on the agenda is the time for our public comment, and we have up to 45 minutes allocated for public comment. Each speaker is asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes, and if there are additional requests from the public to address the board, we'll allocate time at the end of the meeting to complete the public comment. And then I'd request that there be no public comment on issues for which a prior public hearing has been held before the board. Consent and action items will begin immediately after the last speaker. So at this time, do we have anyone who wanted to make a comment? If so, please step to the podium and state your name. Nancy?
We have a birthday in the audience. It's Sharon Richardson. I think we should sing.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
So I'd ask someone else to lead the singing. Okay. Yes.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sharon. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no other public comment, we'll move we'll move on to the consent agenda, which this evening includes the minutes of the April 17, 2013 meeting. It approves actions proposed by Dr. Cogg's staff regarding delays of TIP projects, February 1st, 2013 update. It includes a resolution approving the proposed Cycle 2 2012 wildfire amendment to the 2035 Metro Vision Plan. This does require a 29 affirmative majority, and a resolution amending the 2012-2017 TIP Transportation Improvement Program. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Do you need to
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, well, we're at opposed now. No one opposed? Thank you. It passes. And then next on the agenda, number 9 is a motion to revise the Articles of Association to include RTD as a non-voting member of the Board of Directors, clarify non-voting appointments made by the Governor, and determine if non-voting members will be staff appointed, elected officials, or both. And I'm going to ask Jennifer to give us a little background on this.
Pat will give a more full report in just a moment. This was a discussion that you all started back in March, and you had directed staff to come up with some potential language to modify the Articles of Association to include RTD as a non-voting member on the board. Actually, this was brought to the board by immediate past chair McCloskey. This was actually on the agenda last month, but because it's a change to the articles, we didn't have enough people present in order to make the change. So we didn't take it up at all. So with that, I'll hand it over to Pat.
As Jennifer mentioned, we got a lot of direction from you a couple of months ago that you did want to include a representative from RTD and CDOT on the Dr. Cog board, but there are a couple of things that we need further direction from you on and clarification. The first has to do with, will the number of appointments by the governor be 3 or 2? In February, your direction was to reduce the governor's appointments from 3 to 2. Currently, there are 3 non-voting members who the governor appoints. But you also directed staff to check in with the governor, which we did, and talked with Doug Young, who's on his policy staff, and Doug indicated that the governor would prefer to keep the 3 non-voting representatives or non-voting appointments on the Dr. Cog board, but that he agreed that one of them should be someone from CDOT. Currently, your articles does not designate that, even though typically and traditionally someone from CDOT senior management sits at the Dr. Cog board table, your articles do not dictate that someone from CDOT be here. So we need direction on whether the governor's appointments will be 3 or 2. The other item is, should the appointment be a member of RTD senior management or CDOT senior management, or be elected officials or transportation commissioners. When you all discussed this in February, there was a lot of sentiment that at least with the RTD appointment, that person be a member of senior management. So, but your motion, even though you had discussed it, did not include that direction. So we need direction, number one, to make the language change happen in the articles, and it's clear that you want to include RTD and CDOT at the DRCOG table, specifically CDOT and RTD, and whether the number of non-voting appointments that the governor makes goes from 3 to 2 or stays at 3, and regarding senior management versus an elected official or transportation commissioner.
Questions or discussion? Ron?
Discussion. I think we should honor the governor's wishes and make one of those people CDOT and let him go or her go forward. As to the RTD management versus elected, if we're being consistent in having the governor make up his mind on what he wants, should we not let the RTD board decide which way they should go as opposed to us making that decision?
Denny? And then,
Yes, thanks, Sue. I had a pretty good discussion with Phil about this. And I guess the source of the issue is our planning partners. Just to have somebody at the table on a routine basis to answer questions, to get an on the spot feel for things and be able to carry messages back to a planning department, I think is essential. And I was just shocked that we didn't have it already. And I think we've been well served to have CDOT. Our present representative and past representative have done us very well as far as being able to give us information and get that communication loop closed up. And I know that in the last few years, it was just suggested with Ara, son of Ara, and whatever nickname you want to give to the way funding happens, I think it's essential that on a monthly basis that we do have our planning partners with the board when decisions get made. I think it short circuits a lot of extra time and problems that come otherwise. Phil is ready to do the appointment of one of his members of his senior staff. And I think that it's worked well for CDOT, and I would see that that would be a good path forward, especially since it doesn't make it a project level political decision for either of the boards. If you start getting into elected commissioners, you open that door for something that maybe we don't really want to encourage.
Jim, and then Jackie, and then did I see another hand down there?
We don't have a DRCOG representative on the RTD board, do we? Is there a reason for that?
Well, they're
I mean, other than the fact that their governing documents don't allow it. Or
No, I don't think, when the board discussed this, and Denny, please, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when the board discussed this, when it first came up, it was not about a reciprocity sort of thing. It was, we have the advantage of having historically someone in a senior management position from CDOT at the table who could answer questions as questions came along. And would it not be beneficial to the board to have similar representation from RTD? And that was the full extent of the discussion. It was not about, and RTD should, if we do this for RTD, RTD should do that for us as well. It was really just about having that technical expertise spot on the board so that maybe questions could be answered sooner than later, as Deb Perkins-Smith does for CDOT now and Jennifer Finch had done prior to that.
Well, I agree that CDOT and RTD should have a spot on this board, but for the same reasons that you're articulating, I think that DRCOG should have a spot, non-voting spot on their board for the same reasons. Might be something that came up during a meeting. They would want to ask a question, some senior management person like Pat. I just don't know why, because it gives them a voice, a speaking part on this board. And I think it would be good for somebody from DRCOG to have a speaking part on the RTD board in addition.
And I don't know, since you bring that up, do we take that to the next level that we also want a spot on the Transportation Commission. So I think we need to think about that a little bit more and the complications associated with it, but I hear what you're saying.
Jackie?
Thank you. I want to echo Denny's comments. I think it's very important that this be a resource staff level person. I think Deborah has added tremendously to our discussions at the board, and I think an elected official has a dog in the fight here, and unfortunately there's enough dogs in this
The menagerie?
in this kennel. So,
The pound?
quite honestly, no, I do. I think we all bring our own parochial concerns to the table, and I think an elected official from RTD would be bringing their own parochial concerns as opposed to be providing insight and information to us and then relaying that insight and information back. So I would hope we would keep that in mind during the voting, and I think staff alternative number 1 is appropriate.
Doug?
I move the adoption of alternative 1.
Is there a second to the motion, and then Ursula? Joyce. Okay, Ursula.
I wanted to talk about the governor's involvement. I think we should make him, he should appoint the CDOT person, but I think we should say in our articles that we want a CDOT person, because I think it also shows to the state legislators that we're, you know, really involved with CDOT. We care what they say, and so that they're not apt to make legislation that affects us or take some of our spending dollars away because they don't think we're involved. And I think the governor should appoint whoever the person is, but I think it's really should be that we're saying, you know, that it's a CDOT member, not that the governor has 3 and he agrees that. I don't want that agree thing. I want it more concrete.
The language in the packet, Ursula, does address that.
Well, I wanted to say that 3, but must be one. Of his 3, 1 must be.
No, it says must be. And so I just want to clarify, when you said alternative 1, what I'm reading is provide for 4 non-voting board members, 3 appointed by the governor, 1 of which must be from CDOT, and the remaining 1 from RTD. I'm not sure about the second one.
Let me clarify my motion then. I move the adoption of alternative 1 as set forth in the packet. I have it electronically. I don't have the page number. Somebody help me out.
Right, so which alternative run are we talking?
Specifically lines 31 through 37. Say one of which, I'm sorry, the unchanged language. The state of Colorado shall have 3 non-voting members of the board appointed by the governor, comma, new language, one of which shall be a representative of the Colorado Department of Transportation, paren, either the executive director or a member of senior management, close paren. The regional transportation district shall have 1 non-voting member on the board to be appointed by the general manager of the organization. The general manager may appoint themselves to the board, or they may designate a member of their senior staff. End of insert. That's the alternative that I moved and that we are voting on.
Yes.
Ursula has a question.
Ursula, sorry.
I'm not a lawyer, but the difference between shall and must could, because I know that there are sometimes there are certain words you use.
You want shall.
Okay. That's why I asked.
Okay, so in this alternative, as opposed to the proposed alternatives, the governor shall only have 3 non-voting members, as opposed to the 4 that he requested.
No. 3 as opposed to 2 said 4.
3 appointed by the governor. Got it. Okay, so it's the same as that one. It's just a wording. Okay, just wanted to clarify. All right. Other discussion of the motion on the floor, and everybody's clear on what the motion on the floor is? Okay, then we'll call the vote. And all those, do you want voice?
Voice is fine.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda, All right. Is the motion to modify the Transportation Improvement Program policy regarding station area / urban center studies? And again, I'm going to ask Jennifer to kick this off.
Brad will give you some more information in just a moment, but excuse me, we have a balance in the tip for station area and urban center studies. And this motion, or action this evening, is to modify the eligibility and evaluation criteria for these kinds of planning studies to make it more fitting for these types of projects. And like I said, Brad will give you a little bit more detail on the MVIC action associated with this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jennifer set it up pretty well. The requested action before you this evening is to modify TIP policy regarding stationary and urban center studies. The board previously set aside $3.5 million in the current TIP to fund these types of studies that really support local planning that furthers the implementation of the region's rapid transit system and also implementation of designated urban centers and MetroVision. So when the TIP was originally adopted, there were 13 studies that were included in that TIP, not expending all of that $3.5 million, and so there remains $1.985 million to allocate for specific local planning projects in fiscal years 14 and 15. So this is attachment F. If I didn't mention that, it's page 44 in the online version of the PDF. As Jennifer mentioned, MVPAC and MVIC have both weighed in on both the eligibility and the evaluation criteria. At the May MVIC meeting, they accepted the staff recommendation that came forward that evening with 2 amendments that are outlined in your topic memo. MVIC recommended identifying the North Metro line in its entirety among the priority corridors for corridor-wide planning funds. MVIC further recommended eliminating staff and MVPAC recommended prioritization of rail stations that would be open for service in the next 5 years for next step studies. So that's really what happened at MVIC on May 1st. When I went back to sort of think about how that actually impacted the eligibility and evaluation criteria, I made the judgment call that this really did not fit the intent of what MVIC was trying to do in their motion, and I'll give you sort of 2 examples that happened. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were reflecting intent of the MVIC action, but then also making sure that the criteria were then internally consistent with itself, if that makes sense. If the change was made, do we need to go through and deal with sort of the cascading changes that needed to be made in the document? So to give you an example, the MVIC recommendation was to adjust, as I mentioned, the North Metro line and to make sure that it was identified as a priority corridor in the evaluation criteria. Unfortunately, what they did not do that evening was actually make that adjustment in the eligibility criteria. So if we would not have gone back and made additional changes, that really wouldn't have mattered because those projects would not have been eligible on the front end. Does that make sense? It would have never gotten through to actually be evaluated. So that was one of the things that we quickly caught and recognized we probably needed to do. The other thing that I mentioned were sort of some internal consistency issues. For example, when North Metro came back in as a priority project, we could no longer refer to the fiscally constrained rapid transit network because that line is not currently on the fiscally constrained network at this time, so we had to go back and figure out how do we adjust that to make sure that we're internally consistent. So we ended up at this Tier 1 base rapid transit system that is reflected in the current RTP that really sort of harkens back to the original Fast Tracks network as adopted by the voters. Some other sort of minor things, for example, when this started working through the MVIC process, the West Corridor was still a planned transit facility. It is now open, so we figured we could probably take that off of the planned list, and it's obviously included in the existing list. So the evaluation criteria and the eligibility criteria are in your packet, and I know it's probably a little confusing, but the stuff that's highlighted in yellow are things that staff went back and made those internal changes that I suggested, that I mentioned previously. And if it's just your standard sort of strike through underline, those were the original MVIC recommendations that evening. We did go ahead and circle back with staff from both Thornton and Adams County to make sure that staff was being true to the intent we heard that evening. We were assured that The changes that we are suggesting this evening that's included in your packet are consistent with what they felt was the intent at MVIC on the 1st.
Thank you, Brad. Are there any questions? Discussion?
Move the adoption of alternative 1.
Second.
By which I mean approve the TIP policy changes with all modifications shown in the attached project eligibility rules and evaluation criteria as just articulated by Brad during his oral report.
Okay. Second?
Yeah, Dennis second.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? We didn't have any initial discussion, but anyone have any thought they now want to share? All right. If not, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is a motion to direct staff to initiate scenario modeling. And again, I'm going to ask Jennifer to kick this one off.
This item has to do, as Sue said, with the 2040 modeling of scenarios. There was an extensive discussion at MVIC on this item, and if need be, for those of you who haven't been through a scenario planning process, I can kind of go through my financial portfolio metaphor. Otherwise, I'll just turn it back over to Steve and Brad to tell you what happened at MVIC and again this morning at the MVPAC or MetroVision Planning Advisory Committee. So it's, unless I hear concern that you'd like more detail on how scenario analysis works, and I'll hand over to Steve.
Okay. All right, thank you. This is attachment G of your packet, which in the PDF is page 52. As you've read or noted in the memo, in the agenda memo, the MetroVision Issues Committee discussed the draft 2040 regional modeling scenarios on May 1st. Input was also received prior to that from the Transportation Advisory Committee and the MetroVision Planning Advisory Committee, or MVPAC. Also noted in the memo is that the MVIC on May 1st recommended that staff begin modeling scenarios A and B, but also asked that the MVPAC provide any additional input at its next meeting, which was held this morning. This is the outcomes of the MVPAC meeting are reflected in the table that's in front of your seats that was provided there before you arrived. So that's what we'll be referencing tonight. It denotes in bold the specific items that MVPAC recommended in terms of some of the refinements to what the MVIC saw on May 1st. We do want to remind you that this is really the first step in getting the modeling process started for the scenario analysis. In July or so, we will come back to the committees, and define additional scenarios to model based on some of the previous input we received from stakeholders and based on some of the preliminary model results that we get out of the scenario A and B modeling that we would begin in the coming weeks. With that, I'll turn it back to the chair, entertain a motion, and see if there are any questions on this.
Doug.
Relative to the handout that you've given us, MVIC recommendation with MVPAC input scenarios to model dated May 15, this ties to page 55 of the materials, the table 2, is that correct?
It would actually replace.
Oh, right. Well, oh, okay, yes, I'm sorry.
Correct.
Replace, but my
term
reference.
correct, not.
Yes, my reference to tie relates to the fact that obviously this is a proposal by them to supplant rather than simply supplement that which is in the materials at page 55. Question: the things that are highlighted on this handout, I take it were highlighted to reflect changes that MVPAC was proposing to what we see on page 55, because I am confused in that some of the items listed on page 55 and on this handout are already there. Example, transportation system, the second heading on the handout. Rapid transit system rail miles, the first line item under that. Says complete all of Fast Tracks, adds approximately 50 more miles. And on page 55, the entry is plus 50 miles managed lanes, which I take it to be the substantive equivalent without quibbling over wording. And then the bus, third line down, bus service levels, annual hours, highlighted is 20% increase, but the materials already reflect 20% increase. And I won't go through the rest of them. The point is, the only changes that I see, and I just want to make sure that people understand what it is then that MVPAC is trying to do. Although now you've added some more information, because you say they intend this to supplant, replace what we have on page 55,
Correct.
Completely in its entirety.
Right. This is basically a simplification of the previous table in your PDF that had a lot more information than was really needed. This, what I should really say in bold, isn't necessarily a change that MVPAC made, but it's any item which is a change in one of these factors on the left side. So, as you noted, some of the things in bold are changes from the PDF.
Right.
Some of the things are just acknowledging that what was in the PDF, they said, yep, keep it as is, and here is the final result of which factors they recommend, and based very closely on the MVIC input, would be changed for scenario A and scenario B.
All right, if I may have one more question then, Madam Chair, and that is, in other words, as I hear it, trying to make sure I understand it, staff and MVIC produced Table 2, page 55 in the materials. MVPAC has said, you know, we think we can make it simpler / better by doing this. And so we've replaced it with this handout.
We made it simpler. Staff made it simple. MVPAC looked at what was in your PDF today. That is exactly what they were looking at. Staff in the last 2 hours literally tried to take what they did and what we had in the PDF to simplify the table to say, here are the changes after all is said and done with MVIC and MVPAC. Here are the final set of changes to factors that have been recommended to be incorporated into scenario A and B.
Well, then I am curious. I mean, there are more items listed, obviously, in the PDF at page 55 than are here. Are you saying that, in effect, they're rolled up into these other items?
Some are rolled up into, and some really are not pertinent. They did not, either they did not discuss them, or we actually said, staff said, well, these two are exact duplicates of each other. We don't need to show it twice, and that's, for example, the 2 bus service level things, which essentially are the same thing. Let's simplify it, which obviously I don't know if I did too good today, into just those items that are actually changed.
You only had a few hours. We're not critical of that, but I think the executive director wants to supplement the comment.
So Jennifer, and then Elise, and then Kathy.
Yeah, I attended MVPAC this morning to get a sense of where the group was going, and one of the things that they said was, if you'll notice the Table 2 in your package, there are several places where they're just like blank lines, and there are other places where it says same. Staff's intent was if the line was blank, it meant same. But that caused confusion at MVPAC, and they said, I think it'd be more understandable if, for example, when you mean same, put the word same in there. They also talked about how we had worded things slightly different in certain places. the wording had identical meaning in both places, but the wording was different, and so that caused confusion. So they asked that we modify that. And then there are these notes on the side. These were things, for example, the first note on the line that says freeway managed lanes, bus, HOV, lane miles. It said TAC to define specific locations. This was because this was something that they thought needed very much more site-specific modifications within the model, and Steve explained that that could be done, and we would take that back to TAC, and they would do that. So it is a slight change from what's in your package because we got some additional input from MVPAC. On the very next line with regard to bus service levels, the note says selective improvement of bus frequency. MVPAC talked about there were some places where you had very good headways, 5 to 10 minutes, and then you had others that were an hour. For those places where it made sense, MVPAC asked staff to identify some of these routes and shorten the headways. So again, it's a note to say that they left the 20%, they were fine with that, but they thought we should be a little bit more selective in the routes that we chose in order to show that 20% increase. So, you know, we as we always do, it's like, how do we put this information out without confusing the situation even more? But what we tried to do was to take the input from MVPAC and standardize it, put it in a format that they said they could understand and would be more clear to anyone who looked at it. So that's mostly what you're saying as far as differences go.
Okay, next was Elise, right?
Well, I was basically asking for the summary highlights of the MVPAC input, and if that's what you just said, it's not entirely clear just looking at this. What are the take-homes from MVPAC that we're adopting? Maybe they're the few things that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. Were there any MVPAC recommendations that weren't adopted that there was disagreement on for those of us who didn't attend and didn't hear back on how it went?
I don't. Honestly, the only one that comes to my mind was, you'll recall at MVIC, we took out the increase in parking on scenario B, and Will Tour suggested that go back in, but they moved very quickly off of that and onto something else. So there wasn't like a lot of consensus around, yes, put that parking stuff back in. That's the only thing that comes to my mind right off the bat that was suggested that wasn't put in here. And then they talked a little bit about other things that they were hoping to get to see, like the cost of growth, for example. And staff explained we kind of need to, because the modeling takes so long, we need to get some information in the model. We need to get that thing going to find out if the data is technically reliable, whether or not the sensitivity on the model is accurate or not. And while those runs are occurring, then we can start having some of these other discussions about these items that have been in this parking lot, so to speak, for several months now. But in general, it was a much different conversation than the one that was had at MVIC, actually. And while there were a lot of questions about how things were worded and what things meant, there really wasn't a lot of discussion about additional modifications that aren't reflected in this handout that you have before you tonight.
A lot of good ideas came out today.
Kathy.
Like Elise, I was just looking for a little bit more of the summary, maybe a little bit more of the comparison. And just because I'm looking at this quickly, I'm wondering why the freeway managed lanes plus HOV lanes is 94 and it was 47 on the other.
We did a conversion of everything on here now is all in lane miles. So basically, if you have 1 mile of a two-lane facility at 1 mile, that's 2 lane miles.
Right, so you took out a thinner lane. You were
Previously,
doing
they were
thinner and-
mixed
and-
up.
okay,
And so we
okay.
tried to make them all the same variable.
And then that probably led into the arterial lane miles addition, because that was where I was headed. It's like, where did that come from? Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Those were the, I think maybe next time it would just be like maybe we have that summary for, that comparison at the
Right.
beginning, because we're all
Right now.
scrambling and
Got it.
got it, yeah.
That's a good point.
Deb?
So mine is kind of piggyback on that, and maybe I'm not looking at this correctly, but in scenario B, it appears to me that you increased the managed lane miles over what you had in scenario B in the packet and at RTC.
Correct.
And I'm just curious what the thought process was behind that.
Yeah, they thought, we received comments from a couple of members of the MVPAC that thought that that should be the same in both scenarios. They
So
said,
keep-
why would one be 100 mile? I think it was, we had it, well,
It's
then
miles,
it was
you went
center
to
line
lane miles, right. So
Uh,
I got that. So it was just to keep that constant
Mhm.
between the two? Okay.
Right. And that was a good idea.
Robin?
I just want to say thank you. This was a lot of work to find common ground at the MVIC meeting. I appreciate the extra time that the MVPAC had today. And what I'm hearing is staff is comfortable in forwarding this as their recommendation. This is not just the recommendation of MVPAC, but this is something you all feel good about at this point too. Am I hearing that right?
I'm not recommending, but I feel good about
Okay.
it. Yeah, I do feel good.
So,
I do feel
anyway,
good.
I wanted to
Yeah.
say, I wanted to make sure I was hearing
Yeah.
hearing where you all were at on it, and that, versus sometimes we impose things on you. But anyway, I just really appreciate I think we found a good compromise on this one, and I appreciate folks the time they spent understanding and
Really
reading
good.
more.
We had really good ideas
So
today
thank you.
that were really, really good ideas.
Denny and then Val?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I looked at the UGB, UGA indication at 260. It was on same as it was previously, but because of the variation of the term limits and everything, part of the question is that expansion includes the Swiss cheese infill modeling of when we talk about expansion of 260 instead of the exterior morph of the whole MPO area? Can we get 260, or are we getting it just because we're now going back in and infilling some of that in that model? Or is this an expansion beyond all of the outside?
This is what's currently in MetroVision, is that MetroVision identifies an expansion of the urban growth boundary / area by 260 additional square miles that are currently undeveloped.
So that's
primarily around the outside.
Yeah, so that it does include the Swiss cheese, and that's important. Yeah, that's what's important to understand is that when you hear 260 miles additionally, that's not taking the outward bound of where we are right now and adding another ring around it that includes a 260-mile area. Much of that could be infill within the footprint that we have right now, currently, and it's not. We want to make sure we don't lose sight of that, because that's going to affect your modeling too, efficiency of service and how these things can work.
Val?
Thank you, Chair. And I like the way you came out with. I think it addressed a lot of the concerns that Robin had in the MVIC meeting. Scenario A only has 2 variables that change from the base, so therefore you can at least try to figure out which one of them actually is affecting the actual change. And then when you move to scenario B, you only have 4 more from the B, so it makes it a lot easier than when you have 10, 15 different criterias and each one of them changes, then you have no idea as to which was the one that is affecting what. And so I think this is a better way to start right now and go this route. So I appreciate the work that you've done.
Do we have other discussions? Elise?
I was just going to make a motion that we accept the staff recommendation, which I believe is this page.
Val? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the recommendation of staff. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Is that because I made the motion?
And there's,
You don't like Swiss cheese?
Maybe MVIC's working.
and there's a recommendation for MVIC.
Yeah.
Abstentions. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I just ignored that, yeah. Sorry.
It was only Jack.
One opposing vote, so I don't know how many we have totally. What's the total? 28 to 1? Okay, so it's like
Yeah, I think Jack has just joined MVPAC.
30. The motion passes 34 to 1, and they made a movie about that Minority Report thing. Okay. Next is the motion to adopt the 2013-2014 strategic plan. Again, I'm going to ask Jennifer to kick that off.
Well, annually the board adopts a strategic plan, which is included in your package this evening. And I would start off by saying that somewhere between 75 and 80% of the work of the DRCOG staff and the contractors that we bring on board is predetermined by federal rules and regulations related to the MPO or the Area Agency on Aging, or even some things that you have in process, like the 2040 plan development that we're embarking on right now. But you did have a workshop in February. We listened to the feedback that we got from you. Sue kind of gave you an overview of those big, broad, meaty issues that the board discussed. And this work program takes into account not only the regular work of the organization, but some of those things that came out of the workshop related to MetroVision. So I probably did Pat's presentation for her, but if you have any questions or concerns or want to talk a little bit more about what's in the strategic plan, we're happy to do that. Otherwise, I don't know where Pat is. Oh, there she is. I did her I did it. I'm sorry. I went way too far and just did the whole thing. Pat can answer any questions that you might have, though. But I'll do the easy part. Pat can do the hard part, and I'll turn it back to the chair to see if there's a motion or an interest in having some questions.
Okay, first, are there any questions? Okay, well, Pat, that might have been your easiest presentation. And do we have a motion?
Move to adopt the 2013-2014 strategic plan as submitted.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adopt the 2013-2014 plan. All those in favor, I'll ask one more time if there's any further discussion. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Jack's not here, so did you want, opposed? Oh, no. Abstentions? All right. This motion was unanimously accepted by the board. I stayed awake for that one. Okay. Next on the agenda is a legislative wrap-up from Rich Morrow.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I can be brief, but I did want to point out a couple things for the board. Start by saying we're happy to say that once again all of the bills that the board supported passed, and all of the bills that the board opposed failed. So we had a good, successful year in that sense. And before I move on, I do want to recognize George Dibble, who's one of our contract lobbyists in the back, for his help. I would recognize Danny Tomlinson, except the bum left town as soon as the session ended, and he's sunning himself in California right now. So I'm joking. But Danny and George have been invaluable to us and very helpful. But I want to end up with aging, but real quick, and two transportation-related bills that I think all of you here are familiar with. Senate Bill 27, which was the RTD parking bill, and Senate Bill 48, which was the HUTF funds for local governments be able to use HUTF funds for transit. Both passed and have already been signed by the governor. And personally, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how you all take advantage of those two bills in the future years. I think they could have some significant impacts in your transportation decisions, even though they don't specifically provide more money at this point. I think they provide more flexibility for you going forward. On the on the aging area, the two important bills, Jennifer mentioned one, and the other one is Senate Bill 111, which was the mandatory reporting of abuse of at-risk adults. Was massive coalition effort that really has been going on for about over 15 years now, and finally got a bill passed, because Colorado prior to this was like one of 3 states in the country that did not have a mandatory reporting law. The governor's due to sign that bill tomorrow. With Senate Bill 127, our aging funding bill, we certainly were pleased to see it pass. 2 points to emphasize on that. One is that bill builds that extra $2 million into the base. So the Older Coloradans Fund, which has been a statutory appropriation of $8 million a year, will now be $10 million a year going forward. And that is a good start. We've made it clear to the legislators that we're still falling behind in meeting the need for services, so we'll be back again next year. But in addition to that, we had a good year with the Joint Budget Committee and the budget process this year, because we also got an additional one-time $2 million appropriation in the long bill that we had done some work last year, that convincing the governor to actually include that in his budget request. And the JBC, in addition to helping us support 127, also supported that additional $2 million in the budget. So we actually have $4 million more for the fiscal year 13-14, and then at least the extra $2 million going forward after that. So that's a good start, and as I said, we'll be back. Jim, I think you have your hand up.
Rich, under the elder abuse exploration exploitation, the Advisory Committee on Aging gets reports from the Ombudsman a lot about what's going on in nursing homes. Are they part of the professionals that are required to report?
No, no. In fact, one of the things, as this issue's been debated over the years, we've always had to remind folks that federal law actually mandates that the long-term care ombudsman maintain confidentiality with the residents of long-term care facilities unless they specifically waive that. And Jayla can correct me if I'm wrong, but so we're still in the part of the statute. They maintain the part of the statute that has been voluntary, or it urges various professions to report, but we're not included in the part of the statute that's mandatory. Yeah, Kathy.
Do we have a signing date for those? They keep changing it.
Yeah, so here's the deal on that. They were going to do a signing to include all three bills, Senate Bill 111, the mandatory reporting, our Bill 127, and Senate Bill 4, which basically allows seniors who have state ID cards to renew those online so that they don't have to go physically. He was going to sign all those bills tomorrow. It got moved like 2 or 3 different times. The final word I heard today is it's going to be 9 o'clock in the morning tomorrow at Seniors Resource Center at 32nd and Chase in Wheat Ridge. We had an issue with both of the bill sponsors that Jennifer mentioned, Senator Guzman and Representative Primavera, are out of town this week. So they pulled 127 off the bill signing, and I've tentatively heard they're thinking about doing it at the Capitol on the next Wednesday, the 22nd. But I'm still trying to confirm that, so I'll make sure everybody knows as soon as I get a confirmation of when that signing's going to be. So we'll get our own separate individual signing. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Rich. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, next on the agenda is an RTD planning implications of MAP 21 presentation by Deborah.
Can I stay here, or is it better if I go up?
Yeah, I'm going to
here?
do a
Okay.
quick little intro here just to kick it off. Is it this one? See if I grab there. That's the right one. Okay, so with the federal legislation of MAP 21, moving ahead for progress in the 21st century, some schedules have come out recently from FHWA, from the feds, on some of the elements related to performance measures and performance-based planning. And we had seen some of these and raised our interest. Comments that have been made at different meetings and at the last public hearing kind of stimulated this topic to come up tonight. And so that's why we put it on the agenda. We thought that it would be good for Deborah Perkins-Smith from CDOT to come and offer CDOT's perspective on some of these performance management elements related to MAP 21. Did want to just quickly put up one schedule that's on the FHWA website, which just makes you realize how some of these things related to performance-based planning go out to 2018, before certain types of actions are taken. So it's some of these things are going to be, half of the board won't be on the board at that time, I guess. So there's a long process for MAP 21, even though it expires at year 2 there of, in October of 2014. So the questions were posed in the memo, these 3 up here, so I'll just kind of leave these here and I think just let Deborah take over right now.
I'm going to clarify one thing you said there, Steve. The 2-year funding expires in 2014, but the program itself, the bill is for 4 years. It just has funding for 2.
Oh.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So go back to the questions. There you go. So as you saw by that schedule, rulemaking hasn't even started yet, and the idea is that rulemaking is needed before we know exactly what the measures are that they're requiring under MAP 21. So as Steve mentioned, let me back up for a minute. It's a performance-based planning. It's outcome-driven. And in the Act, there are 7 goal areas that we must address. And for those goal areas, we identify performance measures and targets that we are to meet. So I just want to read what the 7 goal areas are. Not surprisingly, safety, infrastructure condition, congestion reduction, system reliability, freight movement and economic vitality, environmental sustainability, and reduced project delivery delays. So those are the performance goals that we're required to meet in our transportation plans, and the rulemaking is to identify the measures and the targets for those goals. So since the rulemaking won't be finished until after 2015 or later, what do we do in the meantime? So you could wait until you actually have that rulemaking. CDOT is proceeding with what we think the targets and measures would be, or what we are proposing. After the rulemaking is complete, states must set targets within 1 year, and then after the state sets the targets, the MPO must set targets within 180 days. So CDOT's not waiting for the rulemaking. We are going ahead and doing some things that are required by MAP 21. One of the things is a asset management plan, and we are currently developing that, and we will have a draft in December. And it's a first draft. As time goes on and once rulemaking occurs, if there are things specified in that rulemaking, we'll go back and adjust. But we intend on having a draft, even though by MAP 21 it's not required until October of 2015. The second thing is we are commenting on the rulemaking as CDOT. There have been webinars, and on those webinars we have provided comments or feedback during the webinars. AASHTO has 6 subcommittees that are developing targets in those areas that I just mentioned, and so we're participating on that. And then as an agency, CDOT will look at the rulemaking as it comes out and comment on it at that point. And Dr. Cog can do that as well. So that's what CDOT's doing in terms of being proactive on the targets. We're also right now educating our Transportation Commission on these performance measures and working through with them what we think the actual measure should be in the target, and if something comes out different in rulemaking, we'll go back and adjust. But at least we'll actually have a plan and something in place. And we do that at CDOT under something that's called our Policy Directive 14. In Policy Directive 14, we always update at the beginning of our statewide plan process, and we are starting a new statewide plan. So it kind of worked out great that we could have some, we have this new legislation, we're also starting a new plan, so we're just going to jump right in and do what we think will be required. As part of that, I should mention that it says that we need to coordinate with the MPOs in terms of those target areas in that specific area, the target areas for the area of the MPO, that we would need to coordinate together, both in terms of the measure and the target. So we will do that. As I said, we're having some initial discussions and doing some drafting with our commission just to see where they are before we actually start those discussions. Let's see. Oh, one of the other questions, the last question, will FHWA really take away or cause us to lose funds if targets are not met? What the Act actually says is that we have to identify corrective actions, and those corrective actions could be a plan, or in some cases it says that we must move money so that we do actually meet those targets. So I don't think there's any place in the Act where it specifies they're taking money away, but it does state that they can direct where we're going to put our money if we don't meet those targets. So I don't know if that answers your questions.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I have a question, Deb, about you mentioned the various areas. I don't think we've got them all listed up there, but the various areas that MAP 21 anticipates us all looking at. Can you talk a little bit more about, because from the outside looking in, it appears that CDOT is very focused on infrastructure condition, asset management, but maybe not so much on congestion or environmental sustainability or maybe even safety. So could you talk a little bit more about how CDOT is addressing all these other things, or have you really just chosen a couple of places to focus and you'll worry about the other things as time goes on? Or
we started with asset management, which MAP 21 as one of those 7 goal areas calls it infrastructure condition. So we started with asset management, which is our bridge, our pavement. Partly because we also had to do the plan, and we had just gotten a consultant on board, so we chose to start there. So that's where we started. If you were at Transportation Commission workshop today, we actually dealt with safety and then congestion and reliability. So we did a little briefing on them with them as to what reliability means, how you actually define it, what AASHTO's suggesting might actually be something as a target as part of the rulemaking. So we did address those 3 today at Commission. We're slowly working through each group. We're going to do some transit and freight in the future. And right now we are working on a greenhouse gas model that could help us address the environmental sustainability, because under environmental sustainability they actually specify you need to look at greenhouse gas emissions. So we are slowly working through that list of 7, and that just happens to be where we are at this point.
Are there other questions for Deb? Doug?
Just one question. You mentioned that CDOT is actually beginning the process of setting up these specific performance targets, and it will probably be ahead of the schedule as imposed, and that the MPO has 180 days following that designation. Do we have 180 days after you say it's final, or 180 days after the deadline in MAP 21?
So, first of all, we have 1 year after the rulemaking is complete, which won't be done until 2015, and then you have 180 days after that. So even though we're going to present something now, you don't have to do that within the 180 days. We thought we'd go ahead and actually do this rather than wait. First of all, because it's a totally different system, and we thought even if we have targets that are different than what comes out in rulemaking, we can go back and change. We'll at least have the framework in place. So.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right. Next on the agenda is a report on the Sustainable Communities Initiative, and that's presented by Paul Aldretti.
Good evening, everyone. I've had a chance to speak with many of you informally about the SAI, but tonight's my first night to be able to do this for the entire board. Thank you very much. I'd like to go through our major accomplishments over the past few months. And I want to say that the good news is we've accomplished a lot, and the better news is that most of what we accomplished was necessary to kind of move us along. So we've created a really strong foundation in moving forward in the grant over the next couple of years. The first accomplishment is that we finalized our contracts with all of our subcontractors. That was a big issue moving forward. As you know, there were numerous subcontractors in this process. We've gotten a really good start on the regional planning piece of this with the formation and first meetings of MVPAC and the Citizens Advisory Committee. We completed a detailed process map and timeline for all of our corridor planning activities, and I know that sounds like just one of those process things that you do, but what this timeline and process maps allows us to do is really get a good idea of how much work we need to do and how that fits into the time frame that we have. And after we've completed that, we've had several aha moments like, oh my God, we've got a lot of work to do before the grant is over. So it's been a real stimulus and a real eye-opening experience. And as we move forward, we're going to plug the other activities into that timeline so that we can really get proactive as much as possible. In the East Corridor, we formed the East Corridor Working Group and Corridor Stakeholder Committees. And the Stakeholder Committee has met several times. The Corridor Working Group has met twice. Both are really engaged in moving forward. In the West Corridor, as you know, in the West Corridor, there was a piece of the budget to go into the study of a catalytic project. So the City of Lakewood was moving that forward. The city has selected a contractor through an RFP process for that. I know that they're in final negotiations with that contractor. The contractor is a company called MIG. They've done a couple of big projects in the Denver area. They did the Denver Downtown Area Plan and the Denver Play Master Plan, so they have done work in this area before. And now that RFP was specifically for the 20-minute TOD neighborhood implementation strategy around the Sheridan Station. And finally, on March 22nd, we did our full consortium meeting. And that was a huge success, but it was a huge success primarily due to the extraordinary efforts of the DRCOG staff, specifically the RPO staff, who really came up and filled in everything that I was unable to do. I unfortunately missed that. I was inadvertently a guinea pig in an experiment to see what happens when 25 pounds of metal gets hit by 3,000 pounds of metal going 40 miles an hour. So I kind of missed that consortium meeting, but it was a big success. Ben Bekente, I don't know why I have so much trouble with that, from Seattle was here. They are a grant recipient of a 2010 grant. We're the 2011 grant cycle, and he was talking about everything that they've learned and what they've done. Also, Bob Murphy's presentation about what's been going on in the West Corridor was very well received, and the interactive sessions over lunch went really well. About the only negative comments we received about that was that there wasn't enough interactive. There were a lot of people talking and not enough interaction. And I'm afraid I have to kind of take responsibility for that one because the big interactive piece we were going to do was the piece that I was designing. So, you know, we'll try to be more interactive on the next full consortium meeting. So where are we right now, and what are we going to be doing moving forward? Right now, the big needs moving forward are to clarify the match commitments around the match dollars that have been committed to the project. One of the reasons that has been somewhat problematic is that match dollars were committed before we went into the project, and then after all of the contracts and all the agreements were signed, there turned out to be a lot of strings attached to this by HUD, and we kind of had to scramble back and revisit all of those matches because of the HUD requirements. We'll be initiating planning activities in the Gold and the Northwest Corridor. We're actually finishing the membership of the Gold Corridor Working Group this month. I hope to get that off by the beginning of June and start the Northwest Corridor by September. Next month, June, we will have our East Corridor Transit Academies, and then we'll also have Transit Academies in the fall for the Gold Corridor and the spring for the Northwest Corridor. We've gotten a good start through our contract with the University of Colorado at Denver on the Oaks piece of this, which is the outcomes assessment and knowledge sharing. You know, one of the big purposes of this project is to capture the successes and the best practices so that Denver and the metro area, as we move forward, and also other areas, can look at what was done and learn from that, and this won't be a just one-off project, but a real precedent-setting project. So all of that is the work that will come out of the Oaks piece. And finally, one of the big issues that we're looking at, one of the big opportunities, I should say, we're looking at is how we just, you know, we've got all these moving pieces. We've got corridor working groups and stakeholder committees and MVPAC and CAC and all these group UCD. So how do we take all of that knowledge and all that information that's being developed and share it among all the participants? So moving forward, we're going to be taking a hard look at our communications and networking and peer exchange opportunities, and to see how we can make that a lot better. That's all I have, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? All right, thank you for the update. Next, we move into committee reports, the first of which is the stack. Beth, is Beth here? Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be more brief this evening, and I apologize if I talk too fast. I was trying to get through everything at the last meeting, and so some of you did mention that I talk a little more quickly than I should have, so I'll try to make this brief, but I will talk slower. We talked about the Tiger Grant funding, and CDOT announced that they're applying for 3 Tiger Grant projects. One is in Pueblo, one is in Colorado Springs, and the other one was the Eisenhower Tunnel project. This was brought to staff for informational purposes, and as a result of it being informational, there was some discussion among staff members that they were concerned that CDOT did not bring it to the group for advice and recommendation, which is normally the process that happens. So it seemingly was not supported wholeheartedly by this, the majority of the staff members with the new process that's happening right now. CDOT staff chose not to submit the US 6 WADs to Federal Boulevard project, even though it was suggested by Region 1 to the Transportation Commission, and the reasoning behind that decision is that they felt the project was just too big, too large. We also talked about program distribution, the 2014 ballot project list, and statewide plan. The staff discussed methods the state will use for allocations of long-range funds for the 2040 statewide plan and respective regional plans. A county commissioner, Barbara Kirkmeyer from Weld County, and others expressed strong concerns that CDOT and the Transportation Commission are avoiding the regional planning process with their new MAP 21 procedures. And CDOT staff actually stated that the reason that they have changed all of this is because of the requirements of MAP 21. We talked about ramp projects. The list of pre-application projects and the upcoming schedule was discussed. Some interesting suggestions that were made regarding additional information to be shown on CDOT's official list was that the list should show whether a project is in the current tip STIP or not, and if it is a seventh pot funding project, for example, the 1999 bond vote, which was the 6th Avenue WADS project that was not approved this go-round. The rural TPRs were very, very worried and expressed a lot of concern that CDOT and the Transportation Commission won't spend enough ramp money on resurfacing low-volume rural roads, and that was based on the transportation action and vote that was taken last month. The Commission doesn't want to spend a lot of money keeping low-volume roads in great shape when high-volume urban highways are in much worse shape due to the vehicle and the population that we have in our urban areas. So that was a huge concern with the rural TPRs, and they were very vocal about that. CDOT also presented early results from the high-speed rail consultant report, and the ridership number estimates raised some issues with the entire group. For example, the consultant predicted 2035 Colorado ridership will be higher than the Washington, D.C. to New York City to Boston corridor ridership, and we all know that the population numbers in those corridors along the eastern seaboard are substantially higher than what we have here. So there was some concern about some of the ridership numbers. So basically that was the main things that I wanted to bring back to Dr. Cog. And I understand that CDOT received some additional comments from some of the staff members, not after the meeting, stating that they may not have been as opposed to the process as maybe the discussion inferred that we had. So if you have any other questions, you can ask Deb to comment.
Deb.
I just have maybe two things, Beth, to add to that, and that was STAC did take action, and they did recommend those 3 projects. And the reason the 6 in Wadsworth, the amount that was being asked for Tiger was, I believe, $60 million, and the most the feds have ever awarded, I believe, is $10 million. So it didn't, even STAC agreed that probably was not a viable ask, so they approved the 3 other projects to go forward, and that was unanimous.
Okay, any questions? Next, the Metro Mayor's Caucus. Doug?
We did not meet since our last meeting, but I do want to encourage every Metro mayor, and please, if you would pass this on to your mayors, if you're not a mayor, to attend the Wednesday, June 5 meeting of the Metro Mayor's Caucus at 7:30 a.m. at the Denver Chamber. The reason I particularly invite all of the mayors to that is that at that time we will be presenting a proclamation and a plaque proclaiming Paul Ryan as honorary mayor of the Denver metro region, conferred posthumously, and Pam Ryan, his widow, will be there to accept the proclamation and the plaque at that time.
Thank you. Report from the area county commissioners. Don's not here, but Jack or Denny, do you want to? Or
the last meeting we had was actually in Boulder, and well, Elise, you can give it.
Oh no, really? Go ahead.
Oh, actually, we
tell
should
me
turn it
how
over
much
to
you
Robin.
enjoyed being in Boulder County. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm telling you, they have fine elk hunting there. I love it. Let me tell you. So, but no, it was. Sorry, we had our health and human services stuff. Robin gave me a fine report on some stuff she's working on. In fact, now you got me all off track. That was good, Elise. Thank you. It really was a good meeting, as we had a printout and a readout also of the Impact 64. Robin provided that, which was also very good. Mostly the focus on was economic development and what everybody in the region was doing in regards to economic development and the different things, that tools, programs, and options that they could share with each other. So.
Well said.
did you want to add anything, Elise?
No, that was I couldn't add to that.
Couldn't talk. Okay. All right. Next is the report on the Advisory Committee on Aging. Cliff.
We had a very exciting meeting. The advisory committee voted to accept the funding recommendations of the AAA's Finance Committee, and unanimously passed the motion They recommended the 2013 to 2015 service contracts and to the Dr. Clark Administrative Committee. The meeting was cut short due to a bomb threat, and the committee members were evacuated. End of quote. So that's how you get it shorter.
Okay, and that was the highlight. Oh, all right. Thank you very much, Cliff. Next, the report from the RAC. Joyce or Jackie?
Yep. We met on Friday, April 19th. We had a presentation by Mayor Bob Murphy on the City of Lakewood's planning efforts to prepare for the opening of the West Light Rail line. He gave a very nice presentation with pretty heavy discussion about how they had like over 600 meetings to meet with neighborhoods to make sure that they were happy with what was being done as far as the sound walls and the things like that. So they have 7 stations in Lakewood, so he was pretty excited to present that to us. Also, CDOT, there's an overview of CDOT's responsible acceleration of maintenance and partnerships ramp program by Deborah Perkins Smith. We had some not too heavy discussion of legislation of interest, which included status of some of the bills and an overview of oil and gas industry legislation was given by Ken Lloyd, who's the director of RAC. Also, there were brief updates from Charge Ahead Colorado on electric vehicle and charging station awards, and program that was on May 11th, Mow Down Pollution Lawnmower Changeout, was presented by Kate Cook. That's it.
Thank you, Joyce. Next, report on the MetroVision Implementation Task Force. Jim?
The task force will be meeting later this month and have a more extensive report at the next meeting. I will tell you, though, that Tri-County Health is under contract to do Phase 2 of the Boomer Bond project, so that should be moving forward a little more quickly now.
Thank you. Report on the E470 Authority. Ron?
I'll defer to Jackie, who covered the meeting, but I do have a serious public safety matter on item 23.
Okay.
The E470 meeting, they received a clean 2012 audit, and actually that organization is in tremendous financial shape. I think we could all learn some things from them. And they also reported on the CSTAR, the Colorado State Title and Registration System, where actually they will be starting to place renewal holds on your vehicle registration if you do not pay your tolls. So they're looking at implementing that in October, and they're going through some refinement of exactly how that will be done and how the interface will occur between Department of Revenue and the tolling authority. So pay your tolls. And Jim, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Just to say that there are several people, there's $1 million that people owe, about 1,700 different people. Some of them owe thousands of dollars, and I'm expecting death threats when somebody's denied the ability to register their car when they're told you have to pay E470 $1,500 to be able to register your car. So just be well armed, or I don't know.
Wow. And I just thought when you said there are several people, you were going to say there's several people in this room that haven't. No. Okay. That'll be posted on the board out there. Informational items in this packet: CDOT proposed National Highway System, CDOT ramp funding program project summary, draft minutes of the April 17th admin committee meeting, and a draft summary of the May 1st MVIC committee meeting, and relevant clippings. If you have any questions on those, we do have people here who can answer those questions, or after the meeting. And the next meeting, as Jennifer said, will be June 26th. I think we have established that, even though this says to be determined, unless something happens. And so then we'll move on to other matters by members, and that first one would be from Ron.
As you know, we're now into the spring system of gardening, and we had a situation in Greenwood Village where one of our ladies took her weed whacker out, was working in the yard, and her cat lost her tail, but she immediately picked up the tail and the cat and took her to the Centennial Walmart. You might ask, why did she do that? Because Walmart is the world's largest retailer.
Jack, he said it better than he told it better than you did at Sue, I have another one that also concerns Centennial. No, unless you're going to say People's Choice Award.
Just before we lose total control of the meeting, I think Steve does have something serious to share with us, and then we'll go to, not that yours isn't serious, Jackie, but then we'll go to Jackie.
Okay, how do I top that?
Please don't try.
3 board members walked into a bar, and no. One thing I did want to pass out is related to the ramp project list, which we've gotten some previous guidance from the board on. I'm just going to pass these out. In your packet was the list of the, 200 or so projects from all across the state. Well, what we have done here is we have finally, do I have one? Yes, I do. We were able, because that came out like right the day of the, I think it was the day we sent out the board packet. What's being passed around is we took the statewide list, we culled it down to, there's about 100 projects that were proposed within the DRCOG region, and of those, we took the ones that were, quote, regionally significant from a federal planning perspective, and have those on this list here. So a couple of them that we still need to check over and get some more information on, but basically what's in the list, the 13 or so projects at the top under the blue heading there, those are projects that were proposed that are already in our regional transportation plan, in our fiscally constrained regional transportation plan. The items under the orange heading there are regionally significant projects that are not currently in our regional transportation plan that we would amend the plan should CDOT select any of those to receive ramp funding. We would amend the plan to put those in. And the items in the bottom there, the 9 or so under the green, those are ones that are, I guess like the football referees, are still under review to determine whether they are regionally significant projects that would have any bearing with the fiscally constrained regional transportation plan. And then there's 60 or 70 other projects that aren't on this list, which are smaller scale proposals for traffic signal improvements, sidewalks, and things like that. So we just wanted to give you this update here today. Jennifer? Oh, right. And the things in the orange, right. If first CDOT will determine what's eligible at the end of May, so it's probably guarantee it's not going to be this whole list. They will determine which ones are eligible, and then those that are eligible are the ones that, at least those that are eligible and not in the plan, are the ones that you have mentioned in your previous action that you would then review for consistency with the regional transportation plan goals, policies, and action strategies that are also in your packet. So it's the ones in the orange there. So that is the key date. A couple other key dates that I know. So May 31st is when CDOT determines eligibility. Those that are eligible then have until July 1st to get their final detailed applications into CDOT. And then action by CDOT or by the Commission in September, current schedule.
Yeah, I think I've asked this before, but I still don't have clarity, and I don't know if DRCOG or CDOT would be doing an analysis, but what would be the impact of projects currently on the RTP if we added projects in the pink column? Presumably, it would change when they would be funded or something. It doesn't, I'm still not clear on that.
No, we've spoke with CDOT and the feds who kind of make the determination of fiscal constraint, and if something is funded in there from a fiscal standpoint, it would be okay to amend in, because from that perspective, it's like additional money in the long-range perspective, and that's where we're looking at in our long-range plan. It's 25 and 28 years out, and that this would be the ramp funding in that budgetary sense is additional funding. It's additional dollars added to the regional revenue total. And we've gotten, Deborah, I don't know if you have anything to add on that. But
No, I think that was a good explanation. We have to say it's not new funds, it's a new way we budget,
Right.
but the outcome is the same.
Okay, Jim, is this on this?
Yes.
Okay.
And your question may be for Deborah. There were some planning grant funds under the Pell applied for. That's separate from this entirely?
So I do remember seeing there were some PEL applications, and Steve, I don't think has the entire list for the region here. There are more. I think they were probably smaller projects, and he just didn't put them on here.
right, they're in your
So-
packet. They should be in your packet.
Yeah.
That list
The
in your
state,
agenda.
the whole statewide list is in the packet, so.
Correct.
Yes, so I just want to reiterate something. Do not assume that if your project didn't show up here, do not assume we said it wasn't eligible. We're still doing that evaluation.
All right, did you have any other questions for Steve? If not, Jackie?
I just was going to say congratulations to Mayor Noon on the 2013 People's Choice Award for Dr. Cog, because Centennial Park was the winner. So if anybody didn't know.
All right, thank you. Anything else? If not, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.